Hello, everyone, and welcome back again to the second part of the podcast. It's the Full 40 with Chris and Rob, part of the Stay Tuned Network, brought to you by Nova Insider. Make sure, if you haven't already, listen to part one. We did a full game recap for the UCLA game, talked about some narratives for the season, and obviously had a lot to say about the first week that was.
We always have a lot to say.
Yeah, I mean, no one's ever accused us of saying too little. So that being said, this part of the podcast, we had to split it into two. We're going to talk about the week that was nationally, and also talk a lot about the games coming this week, because we have yet again another massive week for the team. So let's dive right in. I want to talk where we stand nationally. And people who have listened to us from the early days might recognize that we used to do this a lot more. And the reason why was because when you're really good and you're like actually top 10 good, you kind of have to keep your head up and look around, right? Like you're going to have to say, like, where are we going to fall out? Where do we stand in the national scheme? And I think my one big takeaway from the UCLA game was that we are national top 10, top 5 good. And we should be paying attention to what's going on around the league. For the past 3 years or so, we've had to worry a lot about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so we couldn't focus as nationally. So I think we bring this back this year and we talk a little bit about what happened around the country.
Yeah, can't agree more. I feel like the past couple of years, we would have been stretching. Last year, maybe is an exception. We would have been stretching so hard to be like, oh, what's the top 5 team doing? We're like, meanwhile, we're like, are we ranked 15 or 20 this week? And like, where are we going to fall in the tournament? So it's good to be back in that top 5, top 10 conversation week in and week out. So let's get started. I will say also too, part 2 of the podcast, I haven't been buzzed before noon in a long time, but here we are. Let's go.
Yeah. You're sticking with the Woodford. I actually transitioned off of it. I am now having an ice cold Calamansi Sanzo. So I'm sticking there, avoiding the buzz.
At drinksanzo.com.
Yeah, drinksanzo.com. I'm avoiding the buzz because I got to do that aforementioned yard work. But once I do,
parenting. Although maybe that would encourage you to drink more. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. And
anyway.
so what's coming after is several Bud Lights are in my future, but I got to get some leaves raked up before I do that. Anyway, what happened around the country last night? So this is Sunday morning. Last night, Gonzaga and Texas played another top 5 matchup on a campus site. They played at Gonzaga's campus, and it was a hell of a game from the perspective of the Gonzaga fans showed out. It was a cool atmosphere, but Gonzaga showed why they are in another league relative to Texas. The game, I think the final score ended up being like 12 or so points, but it wasn't even that close. They were up 20 at halftime. And this pretty much wire to wire Texas. And Drew Timme looked every bit the part of, the National Player of the Year that he was expected to earn coming into the season. And so Gonzaga looks really good. I hesitate to say they're a team to beat only because they've been the team to beat a number of times and have gotten beaten. But they look every bit the part of a number 1 team early on in the year with an absolute throttling of Texas. Though I will say the other part of that is Texas does not look like a top 5 team. So I think we would have held our ground a lot better versus Gonzaga than Texas did. Not saying we would have won, but we would have held our ground a lot better than Texas did.
Yeah, Texas is a little bit of a weird team this year. Obviously, a new coach coming in. I believe they also have a lot of transfer talent coming in, which, one, when you're introducing a new coach, there's going to be a learning curve. But 2, then we're introducing a lot of transfer talent. one, that talent is like super variable in terms of what you're going to get. Like we've seen successes, we've seen failures of that on the Nova team. You definitely don't know how those players are going to mesh together. And going up against a juggernaut like Gonzaga, where those guys have a consistent coach, consistent program, a lot of returning players. Yeah, that outcome isn't all that shocking, to be honest. But I think just a kudos to Gonzaga of like, yeah, we're here. We're number one. Get the fucking line.
Yeah. Can't agree more. Obviously, with Gonzaga, the question is always going to be, oh, they look good in the non-conference, and then they play that fucking garbage conference schedule. So the question's always going to be with them, can they win the big one? The answer's been no so far.
Quick side note on that. That's kind of BS, though. Mark Few has gotten this team to now multiple national championship appearances, multiple Final Four appearances. They are a very good caliber team, regardless of the crap conference they play in.
When I say the big one, I mean literally the one.
I know. I'm just saying, like, that narrative's garbage, but that's a separate discussion point.
Yeah. Then we saw Kansas beat a not great Michigan State team, but kind of really just held control of that game. They looked every bit the part of the third-ranked team in the country in the Champions Classic versus Michigan State. That was the undercard.
Yeah.
The primetime event was Duke versus Kentucky. And Duke looks just a bit better. And Coach K's kind of swan song here, which I don't want to get into that because we're going to be forced fed that narrative all season long. But he does have a good looking team earlier in the year. And Pablo Banchero looks quite good. So I think that as does Trevor Keels. So I think that Duke's going to be formidable. And the ACC had a really bad week. And so I am thinking like Virginia lost, a number of other teams lost by games. They looked really bad. Pitt was awful. So I think what you're going to see is Duke is going to run pretty comfortably through the ACC this year. That's an early prediction. So I'm thinking that Duke may end up on the one line. If they win the ACC going away with a decent non-conference turnout, I think they might end up on the one line. So we'll see how that all plays out. But we're going to pay attention to it. The 1, the 2 seed lines we're going to pay attention to all season long. And transitioning out of that, we talk a little
Big East.
Big East.
Yeah,
Big East. Not a lot of high profile games going on for the Big East, which is good in the sense that the Big East has picked up a lot of wins. It's bad in the sense that the teams have looked really shaky. Certain teams have looked really shaky out of the start. Creighton has looked shaky in 2 wins. And like there was a lot of hype around it because they brought in a really talented class, but they lost everybody. Yeah. And so I wasn't sure I ever followed that Creighton was going to be that good. But then Georgetown, who won the Big East tournament last year and made the dance, lost to Dartmouth, which is just terrible.
It's quite a look. It's quite a look.
It's not a good one. That's to be clear. It's a look. It's not good though.
I will say though, remember Georgetown made the dance last year because they won that Big East tournament. They made a run and look, they got the spot. They got the guaranteed berth through that. Had they not done that, they would not be in the tournament. And realistically, Patrick Ewing's seat would be pretty damn hot at this point. And you would have to imagine, had they not won the tournament, had they not won the Big East tournament, had they not gotten that appearance, and then lost to Dartmouth to start this season, people would be absolutely calling for his head if he wouldn't have lost his seat already. So something to keep an eye on there for sure.
Especially when you consider that they also lost players after that run, which was supposedly such a thing that brought them together. Then they lose Qudus Wahab, who was their big man. And he goes to Maryland. So he goes just like a hop, skip, and a jump away. Yeah, it's really ugly. Georgetown is supposed to be bad again, and I'm not convinced that they're going to be good. And certainly losing to Dartmouth early in the year is not a good look.
No.
So the Big East has looked a little shaky. UConn looked good, and St. John's looks good. Those are the 2 teams that I think had the best first weeks other than us. even with a loss to UCLA. So I am interested to see how UConn and St. John's look going forward. I think St. John's put up like 120 or something like that in their first game of the year, which is not like that notable because they played a bad team, but still putting up 120 is actually kind of hard. It's hard in 40 minutes.
Absolutely challenging to do. For sure. This is always also a funny time of year too, where people play random ass teams to start the year. I think the most random team that got played in the Big East was Marquette played the SIU Edwardsville Cougars. They are a powerhouse. So it's quality win for Mr. Shaka Smart to start off the year there against
There's a lot going on.
SIU Edwardsville.
A lot going on there.
A lot happening.
Yeah. All right.
Anyway.
So that kind of takes us through the Big East. We got to talk a little bit, right, about the week to come. We have a not so great opponent in terms of Howard.
Yeah. I don't know. Should we just kind of gloss over Howard? Like I just, because there's so much interesting with the rest of the week, I don't know. If I'm a listener,
look,
Howard doesn't excite me.
We got to beat Howard. like this is on campus. Like this is not a concern for us. Like this should be very akin to the Mount St. Mary's game. My only thing I'll say is that I hope Jay plays the freshman. Kind of harkening back to part one of this podcast. I think he will. But Howard, I'm not too worried about. We got to get into, I agree. We got to talk Tennessee. That's the guaranteed game that we're playing.
Yeah.
On Saturday. And then we're going to play UNC or Purdue in the following game. So I think we can probably get into that, right?
Let's get into it. So a reminder for our listeners that this is Villanova's return to Mohegan Sun, which was like the start of last year's kind of chaotic situation. It was, I think, the best example of like early COVID season chaos, where right before, was it Baylor was supposed to be in the tournament? I can't even remember.
Yes,
I think it was Baylor.
That was right.
And then
Scott Drew got COVID or something.
Scott Drew got COVID. And then some of the teams in the tournament were like, well, we refuse to play you if you have COVID. And so then Baylor dropped out, and it put everything into like a little bit of turmoil. They found some teams, but it was a weird situation where Villanova went up to Mohegan Sun. They were basically quarantined on their own floor. You more or less couldn't leave your hotel room kind of for any reason whatsoever. Super weird prep. Everybody was trying to kind of feel out how this situation was going to go. And then it was also one of these, we're going to be adding random games as they pop up. We were actually scheduled to leave. And then Jay said, oh, I grabbed an extra game. So like Villanova stuck around. I think if I recall correctly, was it Virginia Tech? I think was the game that we got added, which we ended up losing. And it was just this weird like psychological thing. Are we leaving? Are we staying? Oh, we've got to spend another 24 hours like stuck in basically a hotel with the coaching staff. It honestly sounded terrible, but totally representative of like what the team had to go through last year. Thankfully, don't have to deal with that situation this year. So a return to a little bit more normal Mohegan Sun. The fans are going to be there. You have to imagine the team's going to be back to normal as we talk through with Shaq. So that's exciting to see, just more of a normal turkey tournament and some great teams to play as well, too. All right.
Should we said everything that needed to be said there?
Perfect. All right. Should we talk a little bit about Tennessee? Should we start off there?
Yeah. You're the only 10 I see.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Chris. That's
joke,
beautiful.
baby.
That's
Dad
beautiful.
joke. Dad joke of the week.
All right. So Tennessee, are they hot? Are they not? I don't know. They're like 18th in the country. They're 1-0. Haven't really played anybody. It's a little too early for that. But I would say they're kind of like lukewarm at this point.
Here's what I'm going to say. I'm a buyer of late on the SEC.
Okay.
So as a conference in general in basketball, you get a lot of athletes down there. You'll remember last year, in the absence of Kentucky they had a trash season last year. Alabama looked good. Tennessee had a decent year. I think Florida, I forget. And Arkansas also looked really, really good with Musselman as their coach. So I think that there is a lot to like about the SEC basketball wise.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm inclined to think this is a hot team. This is a team that this is going to be a good win if we can get it. And I think we're the better team.
Yeah.
You know,
Also Rick Barnes is a great coach.
Rick Barnes is an excellent coach.
Like Hall of Fame level coach for sure.
Yeah. They're ranked 12 in Ken Pom. So, and look, Ken Pom is Ken Pom right now. He's obviously putting in there's a lot of like estimates built into his numbers based on prior year performance and expectation of growth. There's a lot of factors that are playing in, variables, so to speak. So 12 in Ken Pom is not the most telling thing, but it does tell you that this team is legit. They're ranked 18th by the AP. So, when you factor those things together, this is a team that's supposed to be, potentially a 4-5 seed type team, this year. That's what people expect them to be. So when you put that all together, this is a tough game. And I think people's natural tendency is to hope that we get Purdue in the second game. And not to overlook a ranked team, so to speak, but might be hoping that we get that big Purdue matchup. In order to get there, though, because I think Purdue is going to beat UNC, but we'll get into that later. Yeah. We got to beat Tennessee, and Tennessee is going to be a tough test. And if we can win this game, this is a big non-conference game to put on our resume later in the year.
Yeah, I agree. I think Tennessee is going to be one of those teams that they're going to stick around. And at the end of the year, they're also going to be a top 25 team. This isn't going to be an Arizona State like we saw last year, which we were excited about, picked up this nice win. And then Arizona State just absolutely fell off the map. And that win was kind of worth nothing at the end of the year. So I'm with you on this one. The player to watch on Tennessee, and then I think that leads into the matchup to watch, is Kennedy Chandler. So Tennessee has this amazing recruiting class came in at this point, 2 5-stars, 2 pretty highly ranked 4-stars as well. Kennedy Chandler's one of, if not the best freshman point guards in the country. He's fast. He is absolutely going to test our defense and to test Colin. You have to imagine this is one of these where Jay's going to make sure that Colin's not the guy guarding him every possession. Hopefully you get a little bit of Slater in there, a little bit of speed and size to balance that out. Just because Chandler is supposed to be a pretty fast guy. We know speed is not Colin's greatest attribute. So that to me is the big thing that we'll have to watch. And granted, Tennessee's only played 1 game and it was against kind of a cupcake opponent, but Chandler kind of lived up to the billing. I think he put up around 20 points or so. So look, he knows how to play. He's absolutely going to be the guy that I think we're going to have to watch. A couple of their other recruits that came in, they've got the other 5-star guy they have coming in, this guy Huntley Hatfield. I think he's like 6'9" or something, 230. And this is getting into a theme that we're going to hit with the rest of these previews as well too. This is going to be a big test week for Eric Dixon. He is going to play some legit big men, and we're going to learn a lot about him. Is he able to hold up offensively? Is he able to hold up defensively? Is he able to stay out of foul trouble? And so not everything's going to flow through Huntley Hatfield with Tennessee, but I think it's going to be enough of a test for Dixon that we'll start to learn something about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have much to add in terms of content about that, but this is an interesting matchup because this is a sharp recruiting class and a decent returning cast. Yeah. Versus obviously our veterans. So the question is, does the athleticism, does the talent that Tennessee brought in, how does that match up versus the experience and steadiness of our team? What I think that could end up is it could be an interesting first half. I think over time, we salt them down and kind of just establish and maintain our strength and finally end up with a big win against a ranked opponent that will look good because, as I mentioned, when you have a young team, they're going to get better throughout the year as Rick Barnes continues to play them. So I view this as a win going on. I don't know by how much. Like I actually end up thinking that with fouls and whatnot, it ends up being 12. I think we end up with like 5 minutes left to go in the game, up like 7-8, and then like, a couple here and there back and forth. But then fouls at the end of the game end up pushing this game to a 10 to 12 point victory for the Cats.
I like it. I'm going to go a little bit smaller margin of victory. The thing I think our vets are able to pull it out, and that experience just comes to play. The thing I'm really going to be watching and then watching throughout the week is how much burn that we talked about earlier, how much burn Longino and Trey Patterson get. Those are the two freshmen that I'm looking to see get some time on the court. I want to be able to see what they can do. And I think they'll give us a little bit of a different look, especially when we're playing a team that I think will probably run a little bit deeper with Tennessee.
Who do you think is the difference maker? I mean, CJ Holmes said that Colin's going to eat Chandler for lunch.
I don't know about that.
But I don't know. Who do you think is this a Slater game? I think it's more of a Moore game, if I'm being honest with you. I think we look at like established good guard play. I think Moore is going to carry the day here.
It's interesting as I think about it. I kind of like CJ's point. I don't think Colin's going to eat Chandler alive, but I do think his savvy and his experience is absolutely going to come to play. And I think we could realistically see a game where, Colin comes in, just drops 20, and we're like, that was a really solid Colin game. Wouldn't surprise me, just the sets that Villanova runs, that we'd be able to get some good open looks there. So I'm going to go with Colin, actually.
All right.
That said, I think Chandler will do some definite damage on his offensive end as well, too. So that's why I don't think it's going to be like a domination or anything like that.
Yeah. All right. So then we got UNC or Purdue.
Yeah.
I think so. I said this before. I think that we have to win the Tennessee game to see Purdue. Yeah. UNC is to me a little overrated. They're getting a little bit of a North Carolina,
it's a program ranking at this point.
Powder blue. Program ranking right now. They did not look great against Brown. You could argue, okay, they're just, not excited to play Brown. They're looking forward to bigger games on the Met. That's all fine, but it's a new coach. It's not Roy Williams anymore. It's Hubie Davis. So, it's definitely a guy who's got to feel out his head coaching, chops. It's going to be a little interesting for them. I think in the early go, they bring back some guys. They got a good class. So there's a lot to like about UNC but I think that what's to like is a little bit more long range in nature. I think that right now, this is not a classic UNC great team. Whereas I think Purdue has a hell of a team assembled. Totally. I think Purdue is going to be high on people's lists early in the year. It just seems like they just continuously always have just all of the tall people in the country on their team.
Yes, 100%.
And they have decent enough guard play. To me, they're Ken Palm number 5. They're ranked number 7. Rob, I think I'm previewing Purdue more than I'm previewing UNC on this podcast, because I think that's who we end up seeing. Now, obviously, you could say, okay, well, if we lose, then we end up playing UNC. Fine. But I think I said already everything that needs to be said about UNC.
Yeah. I think regardless of who we play, which I really do hope it's Purdue just from a test perspective, either matchup is going to be really challenging for Dixon. I'll touch on UNC. One thing I do want to call out, their best guy is Armando Bacot. I actually played with J-Rob back at IMG Academy. He was a 5-star recruit a couple of years ago as well. Awesome big man, going to give Dixon a great test. But ideally, like you said, we end up playing Purdue. The two guys that you need to know, well, there's probably 3 guys on Purdue, but 2 of them I'm going to lump together because they're like the big fucking trees that Matt Painter always likes to recruit. Year in and year out, man, if there's stuff that doesn't change in college basketball, it's Jay Wright leading the fashion trends. It's Coach K, like, I don't even know, like people taking swipes at Coach K and Coach K outperforming shit, whatever. It's bullshit. Kansas winning the Big 12. And then it's Matt Painter recruiting two fucking huge people to play like it's 1990 and just run their offense through these power forwards / centers. Trevion Williams is their main guy. He was an all Big Ten player last year, decided to come back. He's 6'10 and like 280 or something like that. It's going to be a load for Dixon to handle. And I think this could be one of these. He either absolutely trashes Dixon or Dixon just shows up and says, like, he's not going to stop. To be clear, like, he's not going to stop him. It's one of these, can you limit it? Can you limit the damage and just disrupt their offense enough so that they have to think about some different options? And that, I think, is what Dixon should be aspiring to on this one. The other tall guy they have is Zach Eddy, who still plays like 17, 18 minutes a game. He's 7'4".
Jesus.
Dixon's what, 6'8", 6'9" max? So just huge. Eddy's not as tall or not as talented as Williams, but he's good enough to score some points. And when you've got 6-7 inches on somebody, it's going to make a difference. So really interesting to see what'll happen with that. I think that's the real big thing to watch out for. As you allude to, Chris, Purdue's legit. They brought their entire starting five back from last year when they got a number 4 seed. They didn't perform well in the tournament, but this is a team that knows how to play together. This is a guy, Matt Painter, their coach, who has been at Purdue for a long time. He's got a system in place. He knows how he likes to play. He obviously doesn't have quite the track record of Jay, but he's a very high caliber coach. He's going to have these guys ready. This is going to be a great matchup. If we end up playing them and get the win, end of the year, that's like, this win's going to be as solid, if not more solid, than a win against UCLA. I think there's actually, if I'm a betting man, I think Purdue ends up having a better season than UCLA.
Well, the one thing too is that the Big Ten tends to be a tougher test than the Pac-12. So, I think that, when you think of strength of schedule on the Purdue front, like if they pick up wins against Michigan and stuff like that, Ohio State, what have you, which they will, like just because they continue to get those opportunities, then a win against Purdue would be enormous. Look, I hear what you're saying about the Dixon and it's big for him. And I totally agree. I think if we get Purdue, first off, that means we would have beat Tennessee, which I think is a huge resume builder for this team. And then the opportunity to get Purdue, I tend to get your point on the Purdue versus UCLA front. I think that's splitting a little bit of hairs, but fine. I think the key against the big lineup is that Jay has to find a way to impose our will and get them uncomfortable and force them to play at our speed. So I'm actually going to go the opposite direction and say it's going to come down to guard play on our end. Can we get them to get uncomfortable? Can we stretch them out? On the front of Dixon, can Dixon shoot the three?
Interesting.
Can Slater shoot the three? Can we get guys to hit shots early in that game to make Painter have to adjust to us?
I like it.
Like, because if we start to play this game where half court sets and they're dumping it down in and those guys are comfortable and this and the other thing, we're just not going to be able to keep up with their ability to kind of consistently put the ball through the basket down low. But can we have the guys disrupt the passing lanes? Can we get guys to front the post, make them uncomfortable, get them out of what they do? Whenever Villanova plays successfully against a team that's much bigger than them, yeah, it means that we got good play down low and people did well on that front. But it's because they didn't get opportunities. Their big men didn't get opportunities. We have to find a way to do that. So I'm looking at Moore. I'm looking at Colin. I'm looking at even Daniels. I'm looking at, who else Samuels, Slater, who else can do that and make them adjust to us. So that's my challenge to us on the Purdue game. I'm sure Jay's going to think the same thing. I would look for Purdue to take a pretty sizable early lead, like 10 to 12 points. because we just get trapped into trying to play their game. And then the halftime adjustments or the in-game adjustments by Jay force us to go small. And that small ball helps us if the ball is going through the hoop. If we're cold shooting, this is going to be a long game for us versus Purdue.
I would love to see Dixon out there stretching the floor and shooting the three. He took a number of shots in his limited time on the floor last year. Would love to see that become a little bit more of his regular repertoire. It obviously does wonders for our offense.
You have to get those guys off of the middle of we got to spread them out. Like you got to get them out of the paint. Yeah. So if Dixon can spread the offense a little bit, it'll free up the driving lanes for more and stuff like that. So that's going to be how it is. Otherwise, it's going to be just a block party, and it's going to be ugly. Yeah. So that's definitely a game to look forward to. What do you think of that? What do you think of this week? Like a 2-1 week?
I think a 2-1 week is pretty realistic. Howard is a gimme. I think we both said we feel good enough about Tennessee that we should win that. Or in the chance where we lose to Tennessee, I think we then pick up a win against, regardless of UNC or Purdue. I just think if we're coming off of a loss, I think we'll pick up the win. I think Jay will coach these guys back. And I think there's enough veteran leadership on that team that it would be challenging for us to pick up 2 losses in a row.
It'll be UNC in my mind. I think Purdue's going to stomp all over UNC. And so I do think that we'll beat UNC in the second game. I'd rather the 2-1 where we beat Tennessee and lose to Purdue than lose to Tennessee and beat UNC. I'm just not seeing it with UNC this year.
Yeah. But so we're both saying 2-1 this week at least.
Yeah. 2-1. And then we get into Big 5 and Baylor and stuff like that in Syracuse. And I think there's a lot of wins in the second part of our non-conference schedule.
Yeah.
So don't worry too much, but I can understand if we lose a game this weekend, fans getting a little antsy and not wanting to drop to like 3 or 4 losses in the non-conference schedule, but just be patient.
Yeah. Should we look ahead to some of the rest of the Big East as well? There are a couple interesting games coming up this week.
Yeah, we have the Gavitt tip-off games, which I continue to protest on the grounds that Villanova hasn't played Michigan State yet.
Yeah, but did they get back to you on your protest and your formally lodged complaints?
No, they haven't gotten back to me.
That's surprising. I figured they would have gotten back to you by now.
Yeah. This is an environment in this world where people listen to protesters a lot. So this is, I'm surprised. But
yes, there were a lot of people marshaling behind you as well to just show their enthusiasm for the injustice that Villanova has suffered at the hands of the Gavitt games.
That's right.
It continues to be just a worldwide disgrace. But anyway, here we are. This is 2021.
We do have 2 intriguing matchups to see kind of where the Big East stands in all of this.
Yeah.
The first one is, in my mind, Seton Hall visits Michigan. Now, I wish it was the other way, Michigan at Seton Hall, because I think Seton Hall at the Prudential Center early in the year can be dangerous. So I'm not seeing Seton Hall beating Michigan here. I think I think Michigan's good, and I think Michigan's going to end up winning this pretty comfortably. But if Seton Hall can handle themselves pretty well on the road, that might bode well for their chances long term in the Big East schedule. And then the other game that I am very interested to see is how Ohio State does at Xavier. I believe that game's at Xavier. I could be wrong. I'm just double checking. Yes, Ohio State's at Xavier. I love that. I love that for Xavier. Ohio State's ranked. It's an all Ohio matchup. Xavier's really good at home. Their fans are really into it. I think that Xavier picks up an early season win on behalf of the conference against Ohio State at the Cintas Center versus old Big East coach
Chris Holtman.
So I like the chances there for Xavier. So those are 2 big games. I think Xavier picks up one of the first big wins and resume builders for the conference early this week.
Yeah, I can see it happening. I don't think that's necessarily going to be an indication of how good Xavier actually is. I think they're very much going to benefit from some nice home court advantage there, and the fact that this is a little bit of an in-state rivalry as well, too. So there'll be plenty of energy around that one. But yeah, I could absolutely see Xavier pulling that out. I think Seton Hall is going to get smoked by Michigan. I'm not all that bullish on the Hall. I'm with you. If it was at the Rock, the Prudential Center, it'd be a little bit of a different story, but it's not. So I think the Big East comes out of these big games 1-1 this week, and then we'll see what happens with the rest of the field after that.
All right, little couple grab bag things. We
Yeah.
did have we had the 2022 recruiting class sign this year, and they all signed, which was good. That's always the one thing.
No surprises. That's good.
No surprise. They all signed their agreements, but they're coming, and this is a hell of a class. Brendan Hausen, I want to talk about him first really quick. Sniper, but he's coming out of like bumblefuck Texas. And
Absolutely.
like that's the highlight for me, is that Jay's recruiting is now becoming like a national thing because, I want to play for Jay Wright at Villanova.
Totally.
Like that's the takeaway from the Hausen commit. He's a sniper. We need shooters. You can never have enough of them in the Jay Wright system. So I love it for the Cats. The two recruits that I'm more excited about, I think Hausen might be a candidate for a red shirt, if I'm being completely honest with you. The recruits I'm more excited about are Mark Armstrong and Cam Whitmore, and specifically Whitmore is just an electric athlete. 5-star, terrific athlete, terrific all-around player, has a complete skill set. I am really pumped for that commit.
Yeah, Cam Whitmore is man. This dude's body, he's ready for D1, baby. Like, let's get him on the floor tomorrow. He's ready to go. It's going to be fun to watch him. 5-star, like you said, like ideally he should roll into campus on day one, fighting for a starting spot. That should absolutely be in his mind. I'm sure it is. It's one of those, a couple of years ago, I would have been surprised if a 5-star walked onto campus and didn't grab a starting spot. But we've obviously seen plenty of evidence of that in the Jay Wright area where that doesn't quite happen. I hope that's not the case with Cam this year.
But when Jay is a truly exceptional athlete who's also body ready, he does tend to get them in.
Totally.
Spellman, Brunson, and J-Rob all earned starters time when they came to campus.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. And then Mark Armstrong, nice little combo guard. You have to imagine they'll probably start slotting him more towards the 1 and kind of pushing him towards primary ball handling responsibilities. But great 4-star guard, got a great trajectory in terms of his recruiting and his ranking there. So it'll be cool to see him come in as well. It'll be interesting to see kind of how the point guard responsibilities play out the next couple of years, because we've got, obviously, Colin will finally be leaving Villanova after this year. Justin will have a year left, but then if he comes back,
yeah.
And then we've got, obviously, Brizzy, Arch, and then we'd have Armstrong coming in. Wouldn't surprise me, depending on how he does, if Armstrong really starts to try to make a push for one of those starting spots, or at least some significant minutes, but we'll see.
I like it. But there's a lot of time left before we talk about next year.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about some things this year. We got some mailbag questions, right? We're up to the mailbag.
Up to the mailbag. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Love the questions from the fans. We love you guys. We love the interaction. The Twitter Spaces the other night was a lot of fun. I obviously joined late after a few drinks at the bar. So apologies if my answers were less than coherent, but I guess that's pretty consistent with what you get on the podcast anyway. But anyway, point being, love the interaction, love the questions, keep them coming. We'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah. The first little group is around Brian Antoine. We brought him up a little bit on the first part of the podcast, and kind of what's going to happen there and what's going on. I think Jay's got a lot of pressure on him and him being Jay. I think Jay's got pressure on himself to play Antoine a lot when he comes back into the rotation. As long as Antoine gets right physically, Jay has to play. This is a 5-star guy. And look, he's had injuries and he's had issues that have not been Jay's fault. But going back to Antoine's first year on campus, Antoine was relegated to the bench when he was healthy.
Yeah.
And there was a lot that was said around, okay, is he buying in, et cetera. We've later learned that that after a little bit of a slow start, he definitely fully bought in and was fully engaged. He played a lot later in the year last year. after Colin went down. I think that all points to a good sign that Antoine is going to be a factor in the rotation when he comes back. We just got to get him healthy.
Yeah.
The good news is I think the prognosis on the injury, while it was something that is a bother that he wasn't able to get really going yet, and will take a little bit of time to heal. The good news is that I don't think this is anything that's supposed to dog him once he does get back into the rotation. So my hope is that once he's back and he'll be a force. I think where Jay will end up putting him is ahead of Archie Diacono. The prediction of where he should be versus where Jay will put him, I think he'll be ahead of Archie Diacono on the bench. So I think he'll jump to the 7th guy position. If he plays really well, I hope that Jay is able to see that and vaults him ahead of Caleb Daniels. But I'm not going to expect that early on in the year.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you mentioned he's a 5-star. That's a few years in the past. I don't like, this is his 3rd year in college at this point. You're ranking a few years ago in high school is whatever. It's irrelevant. To me, he just brings something different and brings a lot of energy to the floor. Brings obviously some great shooting, as we saw towards the end of the year when he's getting into the bit of that rhythm. So I am excited to get him on the floor. I think he can be a difference maker to this team and should absolutely be getting some significant minutes with a pretty long leash in my mind before those start getting taken back.
This is a team that needs athleticism.
Yeah.
It needs more shooting, candidly. Needs someone to stretch the floor a little bit more. And need someone who's springy and bouncy on the defensive end. So I'm with you. We're going to need somebody later on in the year when we start to get into the tournament and face athletic teams and athletic guards. We're going to need someone who can do that. And Antoine is the guy more than any other of our current guard complement that can do that. Totally. And unless Jay shows that he's willing to play Longino. Yeah. And sorry, after one week, he hasn't shown that capability yet.
Yeah.
So I want to stay on current players before we freshmen are current players, but I want to stay on like the kind of returning guys. I want to jump to the question on question on Slater. Slater shot 5 of 7 from 3 on Wednesday, and then only have one opportunity or 2 opportunities against UCLA. That to me is totally a matchup thing. Slater was a mismatch against Mount St. Mary's, and I think he'll be a mismatch against a lot of teams. Against UCLA, we talked about Slater need to stepping up on the defensive end, and he did. But UCLA had an answer for Brandon Slater in terms of getting him open for looks from the 3-point line in that game. So I think that's purely a matchup thing. I don't expect that. I think that Slater has the green light, and I think he's going to be taking 3-4 shots a game from deep in a normal game, maybe even more. But, we're going to have to find ways to get Slater some alley-oops and stuff like that too, to involve him as well.
Yeah.
And then there was a question about what happened to Colin stretch in the second half. He was tired. It was like 1:30 in the morning for him, and he was exhausted. And so
played the whole game basically. Yeah,
played the whole game, and that's just not going to be the answer. And we talked about the rotation a lot in the first part of the podcast, and so Jay's got to figure that out. Jay's got to figure out he's going to have to keep Colin fresh late in the games. So I don't know why that still hasn't dawned on him, but he's got to do that. Nothing's wrong with Colin from an injury standpoint. He seems perfectly healthy. He's moving well. So to me, that's just purely like, you can't just sit there on a heavy defensive game, a heavy physical game, and expect Colin, even as conditioned and as well-oiled of a machine Colin is from his body standpoint, you can't expect him to do that for 40 straight minutes with really no help on the defense from the bench. So Colin's got to play a little bit less in the first part of the game, and so he can play more to close out games as we go on to the season.
Yeah, I want to hit on the Jermaine question we got real quick. Could Jermaine average 20 points a game to the hoop more? I think full stop. The answer is yes. I'd love to see that a lot more. This has been something I've been harping on for a while. I think his development is like borderline criminal. I think he should have been developed way more as a slasher, and that should have been his role on the team. And instead, maybe because of team needs, maybe because of team philosophy, it was a lot of spot up 3-point shooting for a while. And only in the last, year and a half have we really started to unleash him more as an attack player to really drive to the hoop. I actually think that's where he is most differentiated in his skill set. He's extremely physical. And because of the guys he's extremely physical and an extremely superior athlete relative to a lot of the people that he lines up against. And I would love to see him be way more decisive and be attacking the hoop or making a quick decision to spot up and take a shot or pass it. I think that's one of the areas he can improve in. So I think it's a long way of saying, yeah, he could definitely average a lot more points if he was just a lot more decisive, whether it's attacking or whether it's doing a quick shot.
Yep. All right. So we got questions on the freshmen. A lot of it has to do with playing time. And I get it. I get the questions. I mean, we brought it up. It's an early narrative. I said this on the first part, not a narrative just yet, but it's an early result that is worth monitoring was the freshman playing time.
Yeah.
We did say early on in the year that we didn't expect to see, early on in the podcast, that we didn't expect to see a lot of the freshmen. Then Jay had a massive lineup against Mount St. Mary's, and a lot of the noise coming from the program, and they usually are intentional about that, is that Longino looked to be a beast, Patterson's bulked up, and Nana is enormous. We're going to need that depth. Jay keeps saying that we need depth. He's going to have to use it. And that might come at the expense of another loss or two early in the year. But to me, we say this all the time, I'd rather pick up a loss and steam through the end of the season and look really good coming into March than win a bunch of games and then be gassed by the end of the year. That's the difference between, the 2016 team and the 2017 team. So to me, I want to see Jay use the opportunities of playing big time opponents to at least get first half minutes for the freshmen and see what they got, see what they're capable of. And chief among them for me is Longino because with Antoine out, we need help at the guard position. And so I think Longino's got to be that guy.
Yeah, I think he's absolutely the guy. If I'm one of our questions was who do you think might be trusted towards the end of the year? He's the guy I think where he actually has an interesting role and a bit of a gap in the team that he can fill. I think some of the other players, there's a little bit less of that gap to fill. So I think he could step into a little bit more of that guard type role.
With Antoine, I said it again, but I'll say it again. Antoine down, Caleb Daniels making bad decisions and not playing well, and Chris Archidiakono being Chris Archidiakono.
Yeah.
Longino has to be a factor.
Yeah.
If Antoine comes back and Daniel starts to play a little bit better and make a little bit better decisions, then there's a little bit more understandable. It could be more understandable if Jay has Longino in limited minutes in a limited role. Until that point, Longino's got to play more.
Totally.
All right. I think that's it.
I think that's it. That was a lot.
I'm
tired. Big week. I'm tired too.
I might need to get another coffee before I even do this yard work.
Sounds good.
Anyway, great. Big week this week. Hope to get 3 wins. I think it's going to be 2. But we did a full preview. We recovered the games. We did a lot. We're bringing you a lot of full 40 early on in the year.
All of the content.
All of the content. We want to thank Brian and Rachel for their help and their patience as we talk through this long-winded episode. They've been sticking with us the entire time. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. And as always, let's go Nova.